Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise. And we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer and listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Let me welcome you to another exciting episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. We always want to give you life-changing and impactful information that will make a difference in your life. We have a wonderful guest for you, but as always, I'd like my guests to introduce themselves. Be kind enough, sir, to tell them about your name, to give them your name and your background.
Oh, well, thank you, sir. It's a privilege to be here today. My name is Peter Basimanebwetle Kgomotso. I was born in Gaborone, but my parents are from Kanye. So I grew up here all my entire life.
Okay.
In Gaborone, thank you.
And what vocation were you pursuing? What kind of training did you have?
I trained as an electronic systems engineer. I trained in the UK, did my Bachelor's of Engineering. They completed in 2004 under the sponsorship of Botswana Defence Force.
Okay. It sounds complex. What field of engineering is that? What does it entail?
It's related to aviation. So mostly you learn about electronic systems in the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you are not an aircraft engineer though?
I am an aircraft engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for 6 years with the BDF after completion of my training, and then I decided to thank them and join the streets to try and find some purpose that I can leave as a legacy behind.
I read somewhere that engineers make some of the best entrepreneurs, followed possibly by accountants. What do you think?
Well, I can't make a judgment on that. I think it's all about an individual, mostly. I've seen people who haven't been to school who have done exceptionally well, better than accountants, better than engineers. So I guess it's all about what you have inside, what's burning inside yourself as an individual.
Okay. Talk to us about your journey of self-discovery. A, how did you find out you wanted to be an engineer? And B, how did you transition from an engineer to an entrepreneur?
I was introduced to entrepreneurship by some gentleman called Masero Nchingane way back in 2006. So we started off operating a small service garage. We were specializing on servicing Volvo cars when we had an influx of second-hand cars in the country. And most of the established garages wouldn't take those cars. So my friend Masero had a Volvo. He tried to take it to World and they turned him down. So then we thought, wow, we could play in this space and provide a service to most Botswana who own those cars. And
you found a need and then you satisfied it.
We satisfied it. It didn't happen because we wanted to do it. It came because we were struggling to get the service.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly we would have the service engineers or service technicians from Volvo attend to our cars late at night after hours. And mostly that inconvenienced a lot of people. So yeah, we then started that. It went on for 5 years and it was very successful. So that's when we started to really learned that if you apply your mind and if you see an opportunity, you go for it, that might turn out to be something quite great.
And you didn't answer the engineering part. Why you gravitated towards engineering, even as a youngster? Why you chose that?
Okay. Initially, when I joined the BDF, I joined because I wanted to be a pilot. And I did my piloting for almost up to 6 months of training. And then something tragic happened. A very close friend of mine that I stayed with in the same house had an accident. And he died in the course of learning how to fly. And I think
The plane crashed?
Yeah, he had a plane crash. And that for me, I think, made me think twice. I thought I could do something slightly less riskier. So then I did ask the powers that be, and they allowed me to opt out of flying, and I pursued engineering. I wanted to go and see other countries outside Africa, so I had the opportunity to go to England, and that for me was really something I wanted to
So you moved
go.
from being a pilot to being an aircraft engineer, which seems to me that you wanted to prevent accidents.
Yes, really getting technical, you could say that, because there's also a human error which can contribute. You might have the safest flying machine, but if your concentration gets distracted somehow, you might find yourself having an accident. So being an engineer doesn't necessarily mean that you can prevent them all, but you give them the best possible machine. So ideally, the transition for me was, in terms of academic background, I had the maths and science that I needed to pursue that career. So it was just an easy choice to make.
Okay. What would you say were your aha moments as an aircraft engineer? What were some of the biggest surprises?
I think once you finish and then you have to apply your knowledge, really that's when you start to realize that knowledge is not memorizing. It's about problem solving. You solve a problem and that solution is what stays in your mind, and that's what knowledge is about. What we learn from school, anybody can learn. You can pick up Google and learn anything, but the experience of now going through the emotions of solving a particular problem, for me that was quite a challenge, and that's what I really appreciated about the opportunity of having a myriad of problems that you have to solve on a daily basis as an engineer.
Now, how long were you an aircraft engineer?
As I said, I was bonded for 6 years, and as soon as my bond finished, I thankfully thanked the Army, and then I went into the civil world, as they call it, civilian world, joined other professional ranks and try and establish my own business.
Okay. Now, let's talk about your actual business interests. What businesses did you start, and how are they performing?
I've done a number of businesses. Some have been sold, some closed, some are still alive, some new are coming up. So I think it's a constant journey of evolution. You discard what you think your mind is not really focused on, or something that you think is dragging you behind. Give it to somebody else to run, and shift your horizons onto something else that is really interesting you at that time. So for starters, I would say I've been doing a lot of consultancy on the aviation side. I've worked with the likes of Denel Aviation. I was representing them here in the country. We've done a lot of projects for the BDF, and then also worked with some German companies to provide aviation training. But whilst still doing that, I had an insurance brokerage firm, which we ran for almost 6 years. And then I disposed it off. I sold it to some counterparts from Zimbabwe who have been running it successfully. I also had a transport company which was providing shuttle services for the Diamond Trading Company. We had a luxury transport service. So every 5 weeks we would give them these luxurious or executive cars to drive them around and also play in the events and social services space. So that went well until COVID came, and then we had 2 years of no business. Eventually, we sold some of the cars and only remained with one. So you can see in that period, between when COVID started, I think we've disposed of 2 of our businesses. And during the same time, we were able to start another company, which is the Burundi Private Lodge, which is a tourism and hospitality business.
I thought people were running away from that area because of COVID, but you're running to it.
Yes. Luckily for us, during COVID, we realized that people were tending to go to private spaces in the farms where it was much more quieter, much more safer, and that incited, or at least it made people feel safe in that particular environment. So we also had opportunity to have a lot of people come through during the COVID, and we realized that they liked the place where they liked our farm. So that was an opportunity for us to.
Where is the farm located, and what features does it have that attracts people?
It's in Rasesa. It's just fairly located on the edge of the A1 road, and we built a very nice double-story house. We were lucky to be at least one of the first few people to take countryside living seriously. So when we invested, we built a proper house with everything that you might have in a city dwelling. And people now started to really see that you can turn any piece of land into a proper dwelling.
And I like the expression countryside living. What is that exactly? If you can simplify it for us.
Yeah, countryside provides you with a different sense of being. I mean, in the sense that you breathe fresher air, it's much more quieter, you are in touch with the animals. It just frees you from the hustle and bustle of the city. So, in a sense, we call it country because it's more detached from most cities, and that's why as you grow older, more people tend to want to go and be in the farms, and that's why most people now realize that it's the way to go. And that's why we ended up having as many clients as we could in that period.
And how does it work? A person goes there for what? For a weekend, for a night, and how is the economic side of the business?
Yeah, people go there for an outing. Usually they go there to just relax, have a drink, have a meal. Some people even sleep overnight. We provide accommodation, we provide food, slow music, chilled music, where people can just sit and relax.
And you can take up to how many people at a time? Or how many families?
We have about 5 rooms in the house and about 3 tents. So that can accommodate up to 16 people at a go. Yeah. On the economic side, I think it's doing fairly well. If you think about, because I used to live in the house before I moved out of it and turned it into an asset as opposed to just having it
during COVID.
So, I mean, we are able to employ about 6 people, and the property is able to pay all those salaries, pay all the expenses. So in that sense, I want to believe that it's doing well.
What's it called again?
It's called Burundi Private Lodge and Campsite.
Why Burundi? Burundi is a country.
It's not Burundi, the country.
No, but I mean, that's where the name comes from.
Yes. Part of the reason why we named that is because of the lineage that we took from the Arabic language. There's a meaning to it which means a meeting place. A meeting place in the sense that we allow people to come, experience what we're experiencing, experience the tranquility and peace of the countryside, and also allow people to share and interact with others. As you also run Black, and I think the essence of providing that environment is for people to come and enjoy the space, the service, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where it.
Did you also say the animals?
Yes, it's a farm, so we have animals in there. We've got small livestock, goats, sheep, birds.
So do you give your guests the opportunity to interact with the animals?
Not yet. We are also looking to bring in wildlife. The government has been kind enough to open up for bringing wildlife into our small holdings. So once we've managed to bring...
What kind of wildlife? Zebra?
Yes, 1 or 2 zebras won't hurt. Warthogs, maybe antelopes or small duikers and stuff like that. Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
One of your business interests is aggregation and payments. Tell us about that one. What is it called and how does it function?
Yes. We were lucky to be one of the first few companies to operate in the distribution of prepaid electricity. Way back in 2010. We partnered with Botswana Post at the time and managed to convince Botswana Power Corporation to work with us, use us as distribution networks to be able to reach the entire country and allow people to buy electricity from a convenient place. So as you see nowadays, you can buy from your mobile phone, you can buy from the internet, you can buy from all types of platforms. And that was through our initial effort. So we've been playing in that space since then. And
are you handling the software side? Which aspect are you actually doing?
Yeah, so you need to have a software system which is usually called a vending system, which allows you to communicate with protocols from Botswana Post. You connect directly to their server, into your own server, so that you take the tokens and then you pass them on to the client using the digital mediums. And
that business is still running. What's it called?
It's called Express Pay. It's still running, and we hope it will continue to grow.
And in case somebody doesn't know or is skeptical, how does it help? What problems does it solve, and how does it help an average member of the public?
So without that system, you would then have to go and be on a queue at BPC offices. And I think you remember back in the days, people used to complain about the quality of service because you would be on a queue the whole day trying to buy a token. Now, with digital channels, it allows you to send the service directly to the person's lap, which, as we say, allows you to buy on your mobile phone, on the internet. You'd see FNB has got their own wallets, which allow you to buy and transact both airtime and electricity. So those are the channels that we play in. That's the convenience that you have.
Okay. Do you know what percentage of the market you have now? And obviously one is curious as to whether there's been an encroachment by banks and others.
Yes, we used to occupy a very large market segment. Before 2019, I think we were at 47%, but that has since dwindled down because now the big banks are playing in that space. They've been allowed to play in the tender space, and as you can understand, they bring more muscle, more financial power, digital strength, and they're always going to have an advantage in terms of both marketing. The captive market that they have encroaches into a space of a small businessman.
Is it fair that they get outside their core business of banking and play in your space? Is it fair, or obviously if it's unfair, what can be done about it?
I think it's an error that the PPC or the ministry would have realized that they made by allowing banks to play in spaces like that. They should just be focused on providing financial services. But they're allowed to play in a variety of spaces that are not traditionally banking. I mean, I don't even know what the licenses say when Bank of Botswana issues that, but it has been something that most players have complained about, that banks should buy these services from us and then transmit them on to the retail clients. And I think in the next phase of the tender, you would realize that they would streamline it and correct that mistake.
How do you know it will be corrected? You sound confident.
Well, through engagements, they have acknowledged that they may have made an error in there, and we hope that they will correct it.
Okay. You're also into food manufacturing and supplies. How did you get into that space, and tell us about it?
Yes, we got into that space in 2015. We started off, the company started off by providing services in the fuel industry, and that only lasted for 3 months because of the competition, and then we shifted to food. We set up a small supplies and distribution for specialty foods. So you would get stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily find here, and we would supply it.
For instance?
Especially in the areas of fishes, food for specific religions which do not consume the normal food.
Halal?
Yes, kosher, people of Indian origin also prefer certain types of food. So we would bring all those types of foods and sell it to people in the Delta, in specific areas where it was required, mostly your hotels that prepares certain types of food.
What about manufacturing?
Yeah, manufacturing, we then went into bread production, different types of bread. We do bread loaves, which we supply to various institutions. We supply.
And I hear you, I see you want to call it manufacturing, not a bakery.
Yes.
What's the difference?
A bakery actually manufactures bread in the sense that you take flour and you turn it into something which becomes an edible product. So in that sense, you are a manufacturer. Your quality and your taste would define the type of bread that you provide. As you know, we have our competitors which provide good service for Woolworths. The bread that people buy in there is of a higher quality. And us as the small men, we aspire to get to that level where we can also have a type of loaf that people would crave and want to go and buy on a daily basis.
So is this a huge establishment or when you talk in terms of numbers, employees and machinery and space occupied? I want to have an idea of how big or how small the enterprise is.
The enterprise is still small. In terms of manpower, I think we have about 14 bakers that work on a daily basis. And then we've got drivers, I think about 2 or 3 drivers. So in terms of strength, we can produce up to 5,000 loaves in a day.
That's significant.
Yeah, but in terms of
all shades, I mean brown,
yes,
white, and so on.
Oh yeah, predominantly mostly brown.
And what is your brand name again?
It's Flake and Crumble. Yeah, that's.
I should look out to that one.
The name of our bakery.
Look out for that one. And where is it normally to be found?
It's in Block 3 Industrial. Yeah, we've been operating since 2020. So that's why for me, I keep saying COVID has taught us lessons that we need to do things for ourselves. We can't just keep relying on people to do things for us. And throughout this period of COVID, we've been able to set up 1 or 2 businesses that are employing Botswana, contributing in some way to the economy.
To the economy.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is whether in the distribution side, you do your own distribution or do you have retailers who distribute your product?
Retailers are not doing any distribution for us. They are actually our competition because most supermarkets, they have their own internal bakeries. And as you realized, they also have the power and the ability to buy in quantities, large quantities, so they get rebates, which means they get the product at a cheaper price than most of us do. So in terms of competing with them, we are always going to be on the losing side. Because
so who's consuming these 5,000 loaves a day? Who's your main market?
Institutions like BDF, they have been our consumers for the last almost up to 3 years now. We are going into year 3. And we are glad that government is supporting us. Because without that support, it will be difficult for us to compete with the
Just BDF?
BDF and clients at the DTC. I may not be at liberty to name them, but...
What I'm wondering about is whether there's accessibility to the average member of the public or whether the public can just walk in and buy.
Yes, we have a small retail outlet within our bakery where people in the area are able to buy warm bread, which is what really attracts people, that you get it warm and it feels more fresher.
Well, I'm going to be buying because I didn't even know, because you sound like you're in my neighborhood. You said you're in Block 3.
Yes, we're on Block 3.
So you are more or less in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I should get the address.
You should.
Yeah. And what I'm curious about is, have you identified your competitive advantage? And if so, what is it?
Our competitive advantage remains the fact that we are one of the few, if I would say, indigenous-owned small bakeries. When we came in, we were Originally, we used to buy from choppies to supply our clients, but over time we realized it was a tedious and a very costly exercise because they wouldn't give us the quantities that we need on a daily basis. So we were always short. And then we looked around, looked for small bakeries that we could partner with. There were none to be found. Even then, they couldn't provide to the quantities that we required. Eventually, then we needed to set up something that we were at least in control of. So in terms of providing to institutions, if you have enough clients to supply, you will be able to survive. Because choppies would not ordinarily do tenders to provide any institution. So that's where most of us as Botswana can play in and be able to supply these institutions. Schools, they consume a lot of bread, and the BDF and the police. Yes.
What do you say to those who say that starting manufacturing and some of these other businesses like distribution have significant barriers of entry, one of which is that they are capital intensive, and use that as a basis for not even venturing into these businesses? What would you say to someone who has that mindset?
Well, the most important thing is to start. If you have conclusions about what you are going to experience before you experience it, you are always going to be on the outside. Yes, there's challenges. Every business has its own challenges, but you need to learn how to solve the problems. They would occur from left, right, and center. There is no business without challenges. The most important thing is to go through the challenges, learn what they are, and then you will eventually come up with solutions that would stabilize. I mean, you are right in saying it's capital intensive, but luckily for us, we were able to procure second-hand ovens, which are the most critical components in the bakery, which were well refurbished. So, and we also had the support of the gentleman who refurbished them had been in the industry for 15 years or 20 years. So we learned a lot from him. So you need to have somebody who can guide you, because without guidance, sometimes you just fumble a lot and eventually you end up costing yourself too much.
So you're not shy about asking questions and sniffing around for information to learn?
No, sir. You can't shy away from that.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because it's coming through to me, and I wonder how you cultivated that mindset.
Yes, I think most of us tend to shy away from asking people with the experience. We always feel we are too small, too little to have a discussion with somebody who's well established. But usually that's the fastest way to become successful, because you'll be able to avoid some of the pitfalls that may be lying ahead. And that's the advantage of having somebody with the experience. And but the rest you need to learn as well yourself, because if you don't learn, you will never be able to know where you're going.
All right. You're also in the property business, just like me. Which niche or which area are you active in?
This one is just a relatively new one for me. I just happen to have a number of land parcels that have been lying idle. And so yeah, I realized that the farm, as I mentioned earlier, which had already been developed, is something that I can launch my business from. And I'll be more than willing to learn from you. You are one of the few Botswanas that have had it tough, but you've been able to persevere in that very competitive and tough environment. And with your inspiration, I think some of us are now ready to stand up and say, yeah, let's do it as Botswana. Let's see how far we can go. We've been pointing fingers at other people saying they're taking over, but we need to step up. And this is our way of saying we also need to wake up and do something about this. Instead of selling the land, do something about it. And develop, even if it's small. You start small, but most of us want to just start from top of the mountains. So it's a journey that we are willing to traverse.
Yeah. You hinted at this, but I want you to speak a little bit more about it, which is the dividend of COVID, the benefits of COVID. Can you just sort of recap that and then develop that a bit more? How COVID has benefited you and your businesses?
Yeah, COVID has benefited us in the sense that I think we've been complacent in some way, thinking that the government will be there for us through and through. But you soon realize that the government was also incapacitated in many ways. And that means you need to be creative in how you do your business. And as I say, I may not ordinarily have started the lodging business if it wasn't for COVID. I may not have realized the potential that exists, especially with regards to how government then came up with the reset agenda to say, we've been doing things this way, things may not have worked the way we liked, but let's now shift the focus and see what else can come out of a different way of doing things. The closing of the borders to foreign agricultural products, I think for me that has created employment for most of the youth, which is some of the things that I think had precipitated the need for change, which trickles down to the individual. And for me, I've spoken to a lot of people who say, yeah, we've had a different set of mind shift now. We think we can do this as a country. And I want to encourage all Botswana to take a lead from the president to reset their own agendas as well. If you've been doing things differently, try something new and see what happens.
Yeah. Speaking of the reset agenda, it has eventually led to the formation of the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, which we are all excited about. I wonder whether you have any thoughts as to how this Ministry of Entrepreneurship is going to assist us as entrepreneurs and what impact it's likely to have in the short to medium term.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiative. We've realized that mostly business has been supported by fragmented entities or departments. You've got your CEDA there, you've got your layer there, and all the others that are also playing the space. If you converge all of them into one, you have synergies that would bring results. So for me, it's something that is worth looking into, and I hope that it will serve the interests of small businesses in this country.
Okay. You speak of research and continuous development. I generally talk of a thing called personal development. What are you doing in terms of research specifically, and what personal development are you talking about?
Yes, I think our economy, which would then trickle down to me as an individual, to say, if you are not constantly thinking of better ways to provide a service, enhance your product, you become stale, in the sense that times are moving forward, you are lagging behind. The diamonds will not be here maybe in the next few years, but we as a country need to start looking beyond that and really come up with ideas that would replace that gap that would significantly reduce our economic prosperity. So I have since realized that we have been complacent as individuals, in the sense that we are not continuously learning about ourselves, enhancing ourselves, thinking of what we can become the next day, the year after. That's what, for me, personal development comes in. It means we need to continuously come up with new ideas, ensure that we push them forward. The Africa Free Trade is here. I don't know how prepared we are, and this is part of the personal development and the thinking forward. Or what are we going to do as a society to take advantage of this market?
I think you are alluding to AFTA, the Africa Continental Trade Area or Agreement. Have you, in your research, sniffed around to find out where we can take advantage, if there are any low-hanging fruit there?
I think there's great opportunity. We know that our economy is limited in terms of the capacity to consume products. The diamond industry is well developed in the sense that it sells to the global world. Tourism is there, but the rest of the other sectors of economy, I think that's where we are still lacking. But to expand, you need finance. In most cases, I think Bank of Botswana needs to do more in terms of coming up with legislature that forces the commercial banks to lend based on where the needs are. Agriculture needs to develop. We also need to develop other sectors like manufacturing needs to develop, and that needs a focused approach in terms of directed resources. But you tend to see that there is talk from the politicians to fund prospects in those specific areas. But when you get to the bank, they always tell you there is no insurance, no security, no whatever to protect themselves. But if they are actually forced by legislation to provide that funding, you will see that the economy will be resilient beyond diamonds.
Yeah, because I heard Mr. Ram of CHOP is on the show, and he was talking about the importance of indigenous, citizen economic development. And he said, until the regulator, namely Bank of Botswana, puts it in the law that banks have to do a certain percentage of their lending for the indigenous, for farming. He says until that happens, there'll never be a change. So do you share that view?
100%.
And why do you think the government is reluctant? They always talk of free markets, but there's no such thing, in my judgment, about called a totally free market. The market always needs to be helped and reset and re-energized.
True. For us to be competitive in any aspect of the economy, government is always, it lays the foundation for us to prosper. But if the government is not committed in that aspect, you see that you stifle the entire development of the country. We've done so well in mining. We have done fairly well now in tourism, but we need to put a lot of emphasis now on other sectors. Put money, financial resources in those areas.
And policies.
That
encourage innovation.
Exactly. And then you will see this country might be the Silicon Valley of the world in the next few years. We aspire what Rwanda is doing because they focus. They've got medium-term goals, short-term, medium, and long-term. And they are implementing as we go along. And there's reports which are shared with the country in terms of where they are. But you tend to realize that here information is hard to come by in terms of telling us where we are as a country in terms of implementing things. You only get to be told when the financial or the budget speech is being given that some projects have been completed up to this level.
I want to ask you a question that is often put to me by a lot of people, because you are into aggregation and payments, one industry, food manufacturing and supplies, distribution arguably is another industry. You are into tourism and hospitality. You are into property development, and you yourself are an aeronautic engineer or an aircraft engineer. How do you juggle all this multiplicity of responsibilities, and how do you manage?
I think you have to put yourself at a certain level to rise above you need to be able to see from the top, looking down what you are running. Because if you are caught in the middle of everything else, you won't see where you're going. So I think you start learning by starting with one, you take it to a certain level, then it runs. But also you need to delegate other people to help you run all these institutions. I've learned that hogging things for yourself, you won't be able to expand beyond one entity. So have an entity, let somebody run it so that you can focus on building other institutions or entities that would eventually bring you money from the various channels. So for me, I'm not sitting there every day trying to see where the money is coming from, account for this and that. I have people who are helping me to run most of these entities. So usually for me, the new one that comes, I get involved mostly on a daily basis, come up with processes, systems.
Until it starts working,
yes,
so to speak.
So to speak. Once it starts working, I can then start to relax a little bit and get somebody to run it.
Okay. The new Botswana, prosperity for all. Is this a vision? Is this a proclamation? Is this a goal? Prosperity for all.
This for me, it's a vision that I think I see most of our counterparts or most of our communities are really impoverished. But I think Botswana is such a rich country where resources are held in the hands of government. Literally, government not meaning people. Government means...
it's supposed to be a government of the people, by the people.
Yes.
The people and the government are supposed to be inseparable.
Exactly.
What happened?
I can ask you, what happened? Yeah, so we need to be able to distribute and share the prospects of this country equally, such that people can now move from being survivalist, where we have to wake up in the morning and go look for bread. You can't develop as a person if you have to look for food every day, look for shelter every day. We have to transcend that level. And that can only happen if there's prosperity for all of us. So for me, I've also committed to contribute as an individual and as a company to uplifting the lives of those that are around us in some way, provide shelter, provide training of some sort to capacitate and help people to realize their potential.
You're talking about CSR, social,
corporate social responsibility.
Corporate
yes.
social responsibility.
Yes.
What exactly are you doing there?
The plan is to build a house for the needy in the Katling area. We are working with Pudulohong Rehabilitation Center who are actually assisting the blind in our society.
So you want to build a house every year for the blind, or how often?
Yes, sir. The idea is to build a house every year. If we can even do more. But we will also need other partners to play in the space. If we have a common purpose, common goal, I think we'll be able to achieve it. So we are looking at least this year, before end of the year, coming up with a project that we can deliver before end of year.
Now, I still want to touch on this prosperity for all. Do you think that Botswana can be like Singapore in its own way, like Dubai in its own way, like Rwanda in its own way? And if so, what will it take for us to do that, to get there the quickest or the soonest?
I still believe, yes, we can. There's nothing impossible. Usually it takes leadership at the top to direct and guide the movement for all of us. If you tell us this is where we need to move, you set us a goal and a vision that inspires all of us to get to that level. Increase our work ethic, work for something that will benefit us and not just small individuals. I think that will really drive us to get to that point. But often if there's no proper vision, we end up just idling around hoping.
There are those who say for that to happen, you need a kind of benevolent dictator. The examples that I gave, for instance, Singapore had one strong man, and then obviously Dubai, it had a king, the ruler, and then of course in Rwanda we have a long-term president who is tough. So do you think that we should question democracy and think along the lines of a benevolent dictatorship in that sense?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think once you start to divide, which democracy mostly does, it says allow people to have so many opinions. And when there is division of opinion, there is
the loss of focus.
There's loss of focus, there's loss of effort, because we now start to debate instead of moving forward. So you see that division brings about a burden in some sense. It's more like if you say to me, run 100 meters, and you ask me to carry a lot of baggage, I won't be able to be as efficient as I can. But the idea of, I don't know if we should call it dictatorship or call it something else, which, because dictatorship in some way
dictatorship is negative.
You are forcing people to do against their will. But if you are an individual or a leader and you convince all of us in a way that we end up being willing to submit to your direction, that would most definitely get us to align. And we may not have many thoughts or many ideas that end up distracting us. So it's all about how you perceive yourself as a leader, how you convince your subjects to go in a certain direction. And most dictators, you realize that they galvanize the masses around them. I mean, Xi Jinping has been able to do that so well that not many people are complaining about how things are done, because people are getting prosperous, they're getting rich. Everything trickles down to them. But if you start to have ideas where you take people on a journey and then they don't see the benefits, they'll start to question you.
Yeah, my own take is that you need focused leadership, still democracy is they haven't invented a better system yet. We have had democracies that have worked beautifully in comparable ways to the benevolent dictatorships I mentioned. If you look at Scandinavian countries, if you look at the US, things have worked out by and large in a democracy. So I agree with you that it's about focused leadership and so on. Now, I want you to talk about brand Peter Kgomotso, brand Peter Basimane Botle Kgomotso, and project 10, 15, even 20 years and tell us what you see, what can we expect. Are we looking to getting a massive conglomerate, or are we looking to see a number of entities springing up throughout Southern Africa? What does the future hold if you look at your crystal ball?
The future has to be something bigger than where we are now. We are thinking of, as you say, spread your wings as far as you can. A human being always wants to expand, to become a larger personality, a larger influence in some way, touch other people in a positive way, and you can't limit yourself to just one space. So, we are looking at that, and we expect to grow in that sense, grow beyond the borders of this country. That will take an effort. A massive effort, obviously. You need the help of other people. You can't do it alone. So if we get the right team, people with motivation who are willing to toil and put in the effort, we hope we'll get there. Get there soon.
All right. Now, this is the time of the show you get to hit me with one question.
One question. Okay. So if we were to give you the hot seat of being the president of this country for 100 days and ask you to transform it into something that Botswana will be proud of, that will positively affect or touch people's lives, what would be that one important thing that you would...
One or several? Well, let me just mention three, which I think would be decisive in my judgment. One is to totally be intolerant of corruption and set a couple of big examples, like they did in Singapore, where one minister went out with a businessman after that businessman acquired a tender, they went on sort of a holiday, and the system came crashing on that minister and set an example that we will not even tolerate the smell of corruption. So to me, if you look at the frustration of HE when he gave his reset speech, when he talked about the last 30 years when we stagnated, or it has to do with the ugly face of corruption. Because 30 years ago, it was totally unheard of, to the extent that people would disparagingly talk about Nigerians or people who are perceived at that time to be corrupt, which of course it's not fair to all Nigerians, but it was frowned upon. So I would put a law similar to what Magufuli did in Tanzania, and then actually be physically involved in moving to ministries and paying surprise visits and cracking down at the highest level on corruption. I think if we do what Magufuli did, corruption will disappear almost overnight. That's number one. The second thing that I think would be important is what is already happening, to try and incapacitate these entities. The centralization and the creation of the Ministry of Entrepreneurship is something that I would endorse, but I would then empower. I would make sure that the Minister of Entrepreneurship is himself a successful entrepreneur, is himself someone with a track record. And then I would make sure that his lieutenants have entrepreneurial ability in terms of proven track record.
And then how would you do that?
No, we advertise and we make it competitive. We make the salaries competitive, and we give people contracts. We say, look, guys, sacrifice for your country. You know, you've already made money for yourself, so sacrifice for your country. We give you a 2-year contract, 3-year contract, and with the KPIs, key performance indicators, to see that you are performing. And you have individual contracts, not where people just wait there until retirement and do what they like. So it's really it's a matter of creating an environment of accountability that I think has to be made clear, and setting an example at the top. The other things are just to keep talking and to be visible. Greater visibility of a leader doing certain things normally cascades to the people. So 100 days is too short, but I would do something. I would do something along those lines.
That's great. So I get the sense that in your approach, you want government to be run as a proper business, in terms of just, as opposed to just running it as a mere service provider with no measurements in terms of what they are producing. You
see, they are still a service provider. The main job of government is to enable the private sector. It's to create an enabling environment. That's in my judgment, in terms of providing services and allowing the private sector to thrive. We have a problem where our now government becomes an obstacle, becomes a real obstacle where Tsele and other factors. And it takes 2 months, 3 months to respond to one letter. If you take 3 months to respond to a letter, why are you sitting there?
Exactly.
So I'm just giving an example. But maybe 3 months is generous. Sometimes 6 months. It should be a basis for somebody to get fired if it takes that long to attend and respond to a letter or an email. So anyway, don't get me started there.
No,
I'm not a politician.
I won't get you started.
So we've come to the end of our conversation. Have a look at that camera and just say a few words of encouragement as we get ready to part.
Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Mogobe for the opportunity. Obviously, this gives our business the opportunity to get known. It's a platform for us to learn from each other. Conversations like this would most definitely empower someone out there listening, and we hope to continue to inspire people and continue on these topics which are hot. And it's been a journey.
Please share with them all your contact details, even on social media.
You can reach us at Burundi on Facebook. We are Burundi Private Lodge. On Twitter and Instagram, we are also Burundi Private Lodge. Our office number is 311-770. Email hello@burundi.com.
Thank you very much indeed. You've been a wonderful guest, Mr. Fellow Entrepreneur.
Thank you, sir.
Or serial entrepreneur. All right, thank you.
All right, cheers.